We're back with Inside Story on Al Jazeera America. I'm Ray Suarez. People don't vote in more than one state, at least they shouldn't be voting in more than one state, so it's not an issue of confusion for any one voter as much as trying to hit a moving target. Inevitably, people will show up at the polls, in some cases, places where they've voted for decades, and not be allowed to cast a ballot. Will the courts clear this up in time? Still with us, Ashley Spillane, president of Rock the Vote, an organization building political power for young voters, Wendy Weiser, director of the Democracy Program at the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University's School of Law, and Horace Cooper, a senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research. And Wendy Weiser, before the break, you heard Horace talk about that once we passed the threshold where we began to bring partisanship into the conversation, the nature of the debate changed. You heard Ashley earlier in the program say just straight out that she felt that this was meant to reduce the youth vote. Is this, in your view, an attempt to shape the electorate, passing these laws in various states around the country?
You know, I think a lot of the concern here is over politicians manipulating the rules of their game for their own political benefit. But before I discuss that, I did want to push back on what I think was a very troubling point that Horace made before the break, comparing laws restricting voting to laws banning paper bags. And there's a real fundamental difference there, and that is our fundamental constitutionally protected right to vote. And that is something that courts are charged with protecting, and that courts shouldn't be coming in and policing every policy issue. But if a law impermissibly interferes with that core right, that core basic building block of our democracy, that is the critical role that courts can and have been playing in our system.
2 data points. One, in rural communities all across America, people without transportation find that it's harder for them to get access. They tend to be overwhelmingly white. They tend to be overwhelmingly higher age, either middle-aged or older. Yet, there has been no movement afoot to try to see to it that those people get the election access justice that they deserve, because they don't vote the way people want them to. 2, gerrymandering. For over 40 years, the Congress of the United States was controlled by one particular party, largely by politicians manipulating the election process as a way to do it. In my state, and I'm gonna wrap up, in my state, that's Texas, when the legislature finally got control and attempted to reset the rules so that they could recognize that this state is a red state, not a blue state, and it should have a majority of its members representing that in Congress, the progressives and opponents of this process came out and said, wait, don't do that. Again, it's whose ox is getting gored and not a real legitimate issue about protecting rights.
Well, everything I've heard since starting to cover this issue years ago talked about elderly rural voters, period, not ones that voted either for Republicans or Democrats. They tend to have less access no matter what color they are and no matter what party they're registered in.
But nothing's being done about that. No national effort is being made to guarantee that there are more polling sites that are closer, that there are techniques that are being employed. It's only when it serves this useful purpose to claim that poor, vulnerable groups are being targeted. I'd love to hear about the states where Black and Latinos actually voted in lower numbers after this occurred, now that we've had 6 years since that decision came down.
We have very short time left. Ashley, will you be able to get your voters out, the people that you want to create a habit of voting? Because we know that you're more likely to vote in your 30s if you voted in your 20s.
Yeah, we hope so. And we have a great video out with a whole bunch of amazing partners, Lil Jon, Lena Dunham, Turn Out for What, trying to inspire young people to actually show up this year and participate in the election. And over 5 million people viewed it in the first week. We are optimistic. People are really getting fired up about this election, and will show up to make sure that their voice is heard and to ensure that the people that we're electing are not having the opportunity to change the rules to keep themselves in office.
Ashley Spillane, Horace Cooper, Wendy Weiser, thank you. That brings us to the end of this edition of Inside Story.